Hello and welcome to this video on the Restore Wrestling channel with myself, Kieran, and of course Gareth. There he is.
Hello, mate.
Oh, he's over here. We're going to be talking about something very, very, very important.
Controversial.
Controversial.
Shouldn't be, though.
Hard-hitting.
Journalism. No, what was it? Hard-hitting. I can't remember any of the other ones. I just remember hard-hitting. No one's going to get the joke anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, Sky Sports, all that crap. Any football fans will know. Anyway, before going on tangents again, we're going to be talking about the man, the myth, the legend. Everyone knows him. Kenny Omega. Everyone's talking about him. New AEW champion. He's had a week. He's enjoyed it with the belt. He's been to multiple promotions already. Well, I say multiple. One other promotion.
Well. He's going to another one tomorrow as we're recording it. So I don't know when this is going to go out. But yeah, he's got AAA as well, hasn't he?
He has got AAA.
And that's free on YouTube. Didn't know that, apparently. Yeah, so, I can actually watch it.
Right. Well, what we're going to be talking about today, right, is Kenny Omega, obviously. But our point that we're going to be making towards you, the viewer, is... Yes, Kenny Omega is great. Yes, Kenny Omega is one of the best in the world, and we hope that you are one of the many that think that. However, the point we're trying to convey here is it may be for different reasons than you might think.
Why he's the best ever.
It's very easy to say he's had X amount of star-rated matches. He's done this. He's won that, and that's all. I don't know. Just figures as if anyone can have 5 title reigns. I mean, you could book them to have that. It might.
Jinder Mahal won a world title.
Really, it doesn't. At least for me personally, I can't speak for Gareth, but there's not a whole lot in that. But what we do value, especially as people who have watched AEW, is the work that they put in throughout the year on a consistent basis. And there's been no man consistent in wrestling on American Western bloody television this year as much as Kenny Omega. And
anyway, in wrestling, I'm not hearing that anyone else is better. No, but yeah. It's basically that. Why Kenny Omega is Wrestler of the Year effectively for us anyway, in terms of what we watch. Obviously, we don't watch Stardom, and there's Mayu Iwatani, I think is how you say the name. She's been getting a lot of traction, so I'm sure the fans of Stardom would make that argument. I know someone who does make that argument, and I'm just there like, I don't watch it, so I can't really disagree. But at least for what we watch, Kenny Omega's Wrestler of the Year. You talked about consistency, Kieran, and it made me think of what do you call it? When someone says something, and it's like I don't know. Basically, I forget the word I'm trying to look for, so it doesn't matter. But basically, Kenny Omega's like Lionel Messi, because the reason why he's the best isn't necessarily because he's won the Champions League or the World Cup, because anyone can win them on any given year. Obviously, Messi's done that, and Omega's won all the big titles now. From one of them, but every company's been in. He's won the big title now, so you can do that. Like you said, it's something that gets done. But the thing that makes Omega stand out is the same thing that makes Messi stand out. It's just consistent brilliance. It's not necessarily that he's doing the biggest flip, or for Messi that would be that he's scoring the best goal every week. It's just the fact that he's constantly being effective. And occasionally Messi might score a great goal. Occasionally Omega might have match of the year, but it doesn't really matter because what he's doing. Yeah, basically, when he can be bothered, he'll just have like 3 5-star matches, arguably, in a week. And, he did that this year, but it doesn't matter. But yeah, so that's the best example I saw of anyone was like Kenny Omega's basically Messi because he just does it all the time. And, might not always be best match of the month or best match of the week or whatever, but he'll always be there or thereabouts. So,
yeah.
And no one else has that kind of consistency. Well, other people do have that kind of consistency. But I think for this year, I think Omega's had it, the high moments, as much as anyone, but he's had the best consistency as well. So that's basically how I'd round it up.
Yeah. Just a couple of little things just to mention before we go deep into this conversation. Just to acknowledge that audio quality is a little bit on the iffy side at the moment. We do apologize in advance, but it seems that our connection here that we're going through with myself and Gareth, I can hear you fine. So hopefully you guys can hear him fine. But we do apologize in advance for that. And of course, as Gareth has previously mentioned, we don't watch all wrestling in the world. Yes, you might think some person over in this promotion at this far end of whatever country that may be the best and stuff. And if you believe that, then hats off to you.
And let us know why, because
yeah.
I'm very interested in hearing why.
Yeah.
Whoever else would be, because, you know, again, if it's something we don't watch, or if there's a reason, a point we haven't thought about, it's always interesting to hear other people's opinions, even if I don't respect them, because I don't respect anyone's opinion except for mine.
Yes.
Anyway,
but yeah, just a little precursor there. And like as Gareth said, if you do think someone else is your favorite and all these variety of things, for whatever reason it is, let us know. Because to be fair, if someone's doing great work, then we want to hear about it. You know, we want to know about these people. So let us know at that. But either way, talking about great people, Kenny Omega. Let's talk the most obvious point. Let's get that out of the way with now. Thing that people talk about the most. His matches. Okay?
Yeah. I think it's the most important thing for most people when you think about Wrestler of the Year or whatever, is like the match quality overall. Because ultimately, if you're just putting on bad matches, you can be a great promo and stuff, but then there's not a whole lot to remember you by. You've got to have the complete package, of course. But matches, I think, is most people's most important thing.
Yeah. It is. Talked to Kieran 2 years ago. He would tell you, myself that being, that matches are the be-all and end-all. But
you were wrong.
Nah, mate. But this year, Kenny Omega is a shining example of that, where he's made me care about more things outside of the ring than inside of the ring. And I think that is hats off to him in that regard. But either way,
you could say part of your changing in your philosophy of how you see wrestling or whatever, I don't really know the words, is partly to do with this Kenny Omega year, because I think, like, again, it was just about 18 months ago, basically, as AEW was starting up, that we had a conversation, and you argued that match quality is more important. I argued that storytelling and everything, basically, aside from match, you can have a bad match and it'll be more memorable than a good match without really a story. And obviously you do need both, and that's kind of the conclusion we came to. But you could argue Kenny Omega was basically the guy who really showed you that. Yeah. I don't think anyone's done it to a better degree, which is, again, part of why he's Wrestler of the Year.
No,
you changed your philosophy on wrestling, Kieran.
Yeah, like from a personal level, like, and again, you know, I feel like I'm laying down like a red carpet for him at this point. And that's how great. But like, yeah, like he generally has. At least it may not just be him. It may be a variety of things going on. But I think he's definitely been a figurehead for me personally in that regard. But either way, matches, stellar matches, singles matches, tag matches. Kenny has done phenomenal stuff all across the board. And as far as I'm aware, you've got a list of them there with you now. But there are some obvious ones to point out. So, and that being, at least for me personally, Revolution, best tag match ever. Sorry, mate.
Yeah.
Anyone who disagrees?
I haven't seen a better one. Yeah, someone might have. I haven't seen one.
Anyone who disagrees, you're wrong. No, like at the end of the day, there's some really talented stuff, but in terms of a variety, like you've got to appreciate that match as a whole. But even then, right, as a point that you made before, you could argue that wasn't his best match, like within like a couple of weeks period of that, if you wanted to, like, because of course we had the 30-minute Iron Man match shortly before. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that was like the Wednesday before the pay-per-view, basically. For some reason.
Oh, the man's just amazing.
And a week before that match as well, they had Omega and Page had, I think it was their first defense. It might have been their second, I can't remember. But it was their first big defense anyway, against the Lucha Brothers on Dynamite, which again was, I think, as far as Dave Meltzer put it, was their Omega's third best match of the year. And basically all of Omega's top three, as rated by Dave Meltzer, all came within a 10-day period. So you probably have the best 10 days ever, basically.
Stick genuinely. And I think, I mean, that including the really great match that was at All Out with FTR as well. Granted,
Yeah.
not to the similar level, but in terms of tag matches, of course, you've got FTR on the other side as well, so it's going to be fantastic. But
Yeah.
it was brilliant in its own right as well. I think it
I
goes
think
to... Go on, keep going. You say.
I interrupted you, mate.
Okay. I think it just really goes to show how adaptable he is within these matches as well, because he definitely played his role incredibly well. Because the funny thing is about that tag match is, personally, I wouldn't say that Omega was the top player in that particular match, the Revolution tag.
Yeah.
Because I vaguely remember Paige and Matt Jackson and their
Yeah.
dynamic much more from the
Yeah.
match, but he played his role within that match extremely well. Omega, that being now. So,
Yeah.
and we talked about consistency and doing your job, even when you're at the top, when you're at the bottom. This is going to divide quite a lot of people, but a lot of people, there's a lot of people which will say Okada, Omega, who's better, right?
Mm.
And I know I'm jumping to a point, but just to make a clear point, Omega has excelled with the matches, even the meaningless little matches, whether that be on Dynamite
Yeah.
against the Allen Angels or something like that.
Yeah.
He's played his role exceptionally well, whereas someone like an Okada, absolutely phenomenal, absolutely brilliant, right? One of the best to do it, and I look forward to a time when he goes and gets on top of the mountain again and has the title and has stellar matches, 40-minute classics, all that sort of stuff, because that will come again soon, given the guy's age. But
Yeah.
he hasn't performed as well as Kenny has.
Yeah. All
on a
round,
match,
anyway.
on a match
I think
basis. Go on.
Yeah. I think part of like the point with Kenny Omega, I came into this year basically in my head. It was my favorite wrestler was Daniel Bryan, like ever basically, and I kind of like because of what he's done throughout his career, including Ring of Honor and everything. I kind of look at Daniel Bryan, or I looked at him anyway, as the guy who can do it all. He'd done Japan. He hadn't done the heavyweight stuff, but he'd done the junior stuff. He'd done like the indies probably better than anyone ever has in America. People argue about that, but they're wrong. And then he'd gone and done WWE, and despite everything being against him, and again everything he does, it doesn't. He had a tag run with Eric Rowan, which was one of the best tag runs WWE's ever seen. And like I always thought, like WWE is pretty much the hardest place to succeed on an artistic level because you're so limited. Somewhere like New Japan, they'll accommodate for your style. Even if you don't succeed, you can still be like Shingo Takagi and have like amazing matches constantly. And it's much easier to succeed, basically. So that's an argument always kind of brought up in my head. And it's like the whole thing of working on TV is very different to working. And this is why I try not to compare American wrestling to Japanese wrestling too much, because I've kind of just seen that it's so different and the culture around it is so different. And
Yeah, you're right.
the aim, and ultimately it comes down to like this, is like when you're in something like wrestling, it's not a sport. People cry about that. It is a sport. It's not a sport because it's more of a collaborative effort with whoever you're in a match with the card as a whole, telling a story as a company. And so, again, like you said, you play your part. So whatever your part is, you've got to play that and be the best. So you could in that basis, you could make an argument that someone who's had like maybe an Intercontinental Championship reign or a mid-card reign generally, whether that be in WWE, New Japan, a TNT Championship reign in AEW, whatever, you could argue someone like that has actually had the best year because the work and what they've done, even though they've not been at the top of the card, people always kind of think straight to the top of the card and they'll just compare everyone at that level. But, generally we do kind of look to the top. Because generally the cream does rise to the top. But basically my point is, coming into the year, Okada was my number one. I was just thinking, I haven't seen anyone better. But then as the year went on and on and on, I saw Omega do this and that, all sorts of different things. I kind of just thought to myself, I only ever really see Okada excel in this one style, in this one framework, and within this one company ultimately. I don't want to get on to too much of a who's best, blah, blah, blah.
No.
But this, for me, like, when it comes to this year at least, obviously Okada's had years where he's just been undeniably the best in that year.
Undeniably.
But for this year, I think obviously taking a step away from what the place where he works best, which is the top of the card, holding their title basically. That's his best spot. Taking a step away from that, it's kind of impossible for him to compete with someone like Omega, who does excel kind of across the board. And so, yeah, I wouldn't even say there's an argument for Okada this year, even though he's had some of the best matches. Like, I think it's just been too much. Like, I'd say like someone like Ibushi's had a better year than him in terms of just what he's had to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a point I want to get across, because coming into this year, I was very much Okada's number one, and it's not a bias thing or anything. People will be like, oh, it's AEW bias. I really like New Japan as well, up until about basically the evil turn. New Japan was my favorite company at the time. But New Japan just took a nosedive basically in terms of quality. That part of that was because Okada wasn't at the top of the card, because he's so good when he is there. But you know, it's just that thing. Like Omega's just kind of convinced me. I wasn't even like as high. Like I didn't put Omega above Daniel Bryan coming into the year, and maybe some of that was ignorance, you could say, or for me it was more the fact that he hadn't proved himself in like the realms that Daniel Bryan has. So until he did, I wouldn't. But now that he has, I think he has, at least over this year. If it all goes to shit after this, then you know I might reevaluate. But standing where we are now, Omega has proved himself here, and I'm just like, well, Omega's just the best at the moment, and that's all I can say. But yeah, going back to that FTR match, which we need to get back to the matches because I went on a massive tangent.
No, but you talk about matches. That's good.
But yeah, but on that FTR match, again, talking about like doing what you need to do to get the match over and stuff, people often think about. I think people were expecting a match like the Revolution one, and it was a bit silly because there wasn't a crowd. FTR are a completely different team. The story warranted a very different match, and I think they basically did what the story needed. Not perfectly, because you know there were still times where the match ran a little dry just because of the conditions. I think, well, this is what I put it down to: the conditions they were wrestling in, which is like ridiculous heat, and it was like a 30-minute match or something like that. Very, very hard to keep it up. Whereas you know if you're wrestling at Revolution, it's much easier to do. But I think like the storytelling really goes understated in that match with FTR. And like the ratings it was given like on fan apps, basically where fans just rate it. I think a lot of people were disappointed and stuff. But I think like fans sometimes look at it kind of outside of like the objective view. They just think, oh, I didn't enjoy that as much as I thought I would, so I'll give it a rating lower. Even if like if they're expecting like a 6-star match, which most people were stupidly, they're expecting that, and then they got like a 4.5. They'll be like, 3.5, because it was so far below their expectations. But yeah, I think that match often gets kind of looked over a lot for those reasons. Yep. And yeah, it's right up there. I gave it. I went through another part of my research is I went through like Omega's top matches and tried to really think about them. And out of 5, I gave that a 4.6 because I did single decimal points. And I think that was, what was that? His 4th highest of the year. And I think it was really underrated. And again, I do probably appreciate storytelling more than most people. I'm not so fussed on amazing action or anything, but it's just my opinion. Doesn't really matter, does it?
No, man. In this context, that's what we're talking about. But either way, right? I think what we're coming round to really is the fact that yes, he hasn't been doing phenomenal matches as much as he has done in previous years, but what he has shown to an element of his game is his adaptability and doing the job that's required of him on a given day and excelling in that regard. And so he's excelled in an area that we never knew that he would be able to. At least for me personally, and maybe yourself as well. And so talking of things where he excels, where people don't expect him to, storytelling. And I gather you could combine character work and storytelling a little bit together because they do intertwine a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously,
character is informed by a story. So
obviously, they're going to be 2 strands of what we're going to be talking about next now.
Yeah.
And something that is often a criticism of Omega, although it makes very little sense to me personally, because first of all, people were saying this during the times of New Japan and stuff. And at the end of the day, anyone who knows New Japan,
Mm.
you don't get a whole lot to work with in terms of your actual promo character work. What you get is if you
Yeah.
win if you win in the last match, you get a little promo at the end, and then you get an interview, and then you're off. You know, like
Yeah.
that is as much as you're getting in that company, and even then, chances of you getting that main event, all these variety of things, it's slim. It's fairly slim. Go on.
Another thing to speak about in terms of promos in Japan is obviously they speak Japanese in Japan. A lot of people don't speak English. So
Yeah.
a lot of people do, but it's not Kenny Omega's first language. He did learn Japanese and then start addressing like
Yeah,
the
good.
fans in Japanese, which is part of what got him over really big. So that's one thing to say. So, but because of that, Will Ospreay's been doing this as well, and people have been like rinsing him online for it. And I'm just like, well, ultimately, when you think about it, you really have to overact in New Japan if you're like a Westerner doing a promo in English, because Jay White's really good at it because and he gets away with it as well because he's the heel, and the type of character he just is basically so laid back that he doesn't need to be over the top. But someone like Omega and now Ospreay's doing something very similar. A lot of the promos were very overacted, but that was because if you were in the crowd and didn't understand English, you can then at least get the gist of what he's doing just through the way he's acting.
Mm.
So that's another thing to consider. Like when I saw that criticism, I was just like, you're not understanding the context in which it's working. But also, I remember the first thing that really got me into Kenny Omega, the first time he really appeared in my face, basically, was like his the press conferences in Japan, and he was always really good in those. Like he was always like taking taking the shine basically off other people just because of how well he was doing.
Yeah.
And that was something which I thought always went underrated in terms of his work in Japan as well. So that was another thing where I was like, yeah, he did have a couple of quite cringy promos, but it was basically overacting to compensate for the language barrier, which is I thought was really simple, but most people didn't seem to pick up on. But then also just like his actual character work in Japan wasn't actually that bad. And like the promos and stuff, when they weren't to a crowd, were actually quite good.
Yeah.
So it was always a criticism I never understood. But yeah, this year, I think he's proven himself.
No, yeah. He's so yeah, we're obviously talking this year. That's just a precursor of what people have tend to. I think there's less of that now. I think we are
He's
hearing
won
less.
a lot of people over. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of his character work, an obvious one, and he has had a phenomenal companion in Adam Page to bounce off of, because Adam Page is also excelled in my regards, in my personal opinion, of
Yeah,
what
he's
his role
amazing.
is. You know, being sympathetic towards him, and then of course Kenny Omega's role is you're essentially meant to think that he's an absolute twat. You know, he's a dick. He's all these variety of things, despicable. He's not thoughtful of Hangman and his feelings, and all these variety of things, his addictions and all those things.
Yeah.
And he's played his role exceptionally in that regard as well. And obviously the biggest example of that, was the interviews. One
Yeah.
that you're a particular fan of. I'm a big particular fan of it as well, but I remember the moments of that AEW Dynamite. I remember you telling me that's one of your favorite moments that you've seen from.
In terms of like a piece of character work or
Yeah.
a spoken piece of work in wrestling, basically, whether that be a promo or an interview backstage or anything, that Hangman Adam Page interview is probably the best thing I've ever seen. And then the Kenny Omega one is right up there as well. I think there wasn't as much substance to that Kenny Omega one. It was the one where Tony Schiavone visited him in which is now assumed to be Don Callis' house. I think that one was a lot better, purely because of the things that Omega was saying. There was more substance to it. But in terms of like actually like incorporating his character, you could see in that first interview with Jim Ross, Omega's like his whole demeanor was completely different And this is one of the things with Hangman as well is amazing. This, but Omega and Hangman, they're both really good actors. So when it comes to doing this kind of thing, Omega's not going to be someone who's going to rely on screaming down the microphone, or like John Moxley has a really good way of delivering lines. So sometimes if the story warrants it, he'll like scream it at someone. You had a lot of that with Eddie Kingston because that was just what the promos were. And I wouldn't say, I don't know, Moxley versus Kingston, that was amazing promo work as well. But in terms of like specifically just focused on the character, I think these Omega sit down interviews. I think there was another one. Oh yeah, no, it was the ones Impact, and then the one on Dynamite just recently. But these are all like so they just show how Omega just kind of absorbs his character.
Yeah.
He doesn't really. It's not something he is obviously playing it. He's not like that in real life, but like he almost just becomes it. And it's really, really good. I remember the start of the year as well, the way Omega was acting and stuff. I was immediately like, I knew, okay, I think it was like just before they became number one contenders, we all kind of figured, okay, they're going to go for the titles. And I think most people thought it was going to go to a number one contender match with the Young Bucks, and then the Young Bucks would win, and it would go on from there, and then the split would be there initially. But like I'm talking like right at the start when Omega and Hangman first started getting together and teaming, a lot of people realized there was a weird dynamic and that there was going to be a split and one of them would turn heel. And I remember pretty much everyone was saying Hangman's going to turn heel, probably more just because they couldn't fathom a world where Kenny Omega was going to turn heel because he's the biggest star, all this kind of thing. You keep him face, blah, blah, blah. And they couldn't see what was coming. But I remember...
sorry, just to add on to your point. But also people saw Hangman as a failure at that point. Like his match previous, they weren't... Basically, they were disappointed by Hangman at this point. So they thought, oh, he's failed, so you need to change something up with Hangman as well.
So they'll turn him heel.
Yeah,
there was logic to Hangman like turning heel at one point anyway, and I could see like they could do it, but it's not what they should do. And I remember saying at the time, you can go back and watch our streams. I can't remember what we were doing them on then, and you can go back and see my tweets and stuff. I got loads of hate from Kenny Omega stans who are now like loving this, but this was way back in like January and February and stuff. I was saying this, and like there were a few people who started coming on board the more the weeks went by. But like I just saw the way he was acting, and again, it just goes to show that if you really, Omega is such a detailed kind of performer that you do have to kind of pay close attention. And if you do pay close attention, you can pretty much see what's coming. And this is when I started really getting won over by Omega, because before I thought, he's had all these great matches and stuff, but what can he really do as like a character? I'd never really was able to invest in him because I didn't watch his New Japan run live. So I was just going back and watching matches. And it's like, these are really, really good. I can see why these are great. And I never thought his character work was terrible. Like other people, I didn't. I understood kind of why he was doing it. But it was kind of the start of the year. I was starting to be like, there's actually something really good here. And then everyone's like, Hangman's going to turn heel. And then when they did that Hangman teasing he was going to turn heel at Revolution, it really worked me because I was like, I got really angry when I thought it was going to happen. I was like, I fucking hate this company. Why are they doing this? And I got really angry, and I obviously got worked, and that was great. But it was to that point where I was literally going to get angry if like it was Hangman to turn heel. And again, even at that point, I think most people were wanting it. But like, it's one of those things, Omega. If you do pay close attention, you can really see what he's doing. And I think it was as far back as then, like I could see what was coming, not in the way that it came. I didn't predict everything, but I did say that the tweets are there. So if you want to call me a backtracker, you can. But I'm amazing, and everyone else is stupid. Is basically what I'm getting to.
Speaking of details, though, we can obviously relate that to Don Callis and the photo during that interview that you put forward as well. Again, tying into your point, it's very much a detail thing with Omega. You can't simply watch it and take it at face value. You do, if you want to get the most out of what Omega is doing, be that in the match, be that outside of the ring, in the interviews and such, you need to pay attention to the little details surrounding him, and I'm sure that
Yeah.
eventually you'll get it, which most people do.
Mm.
People caught onto the Don Callis thing. It's just they didn't. People were suggesting the idea of
Well,
the Impact
Kenny
stuff.
tweeted about it.
Yeah,
He tweeted out that what the photo was and what, well, not why it was there necessarily, but he basically gave away I'm in Don Callis's house.
yeah,
But I think people, because obviously he was established with Don Callis before that already, people were just like, oh, they're just kind of making a reference to that, and maybe it's just Kenny actually is just staying there, so it's just a thing where he just thought, oh, I'll throw this in. But again, there was actually a deeper meaning behind it, and I didn't see anyone really say. I saw some people say, "Oh, Don Callis is appearing a lot on AEW." We saw Conan obviously also, and there were like a couple of sprinkles, and there were a couple of people. I don't know who they are. I can't remember who they were, so I can't give them any credit. There are a couple of people who kind of saw something with Impact coming, and I was a bit like, "Oh, is it?" But then the more people were like, "Nah, Kenny's established with Don Callis. That's just an established thing," and Conan works in MLW and other places as well, so it's not like he's exclusively Impact. So I was like, oh, okay, probably nothing then. And of course, it was something. So, but yeah, like you say, details. There's probably so many we've missed as well. Like throughout the year, every time he has a sit-down interview, I'm sure there's something, and some of it just goes over people's head, and sometimes you just have to shrug as a performer. But yeah,
yeah. No,
that was
definitely.
another really good.
But like again, just I remember the interviews as well with the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega and Hangman, because obviously the main bit of drama, the main conflict was of course Matt Jackson and Hangman, and Nick was also on board with Matt, but the middleman in all of this was Kenny,
Yeah.
and him playing that role, a very passive role. But he still, he still did extremely well of it. And then what we saw throughout the year was him take a more and more of an active approach.
Yeah.
And how because of how things have transpired, be that Hangman's antics, the Young Bucks in general getting involved, him being fed up and getting in the car, that it's foreshadowing him going into a car with Don Callis, just all these little things. And ultimately, I think in a world where we've all become accustomed to, I don't want to get into bash WWE territory, but just to make a clear point, we've come to expect things being very brash, very quick, very unrealistic in the realms of WWE and the way that they provide their stories. Whereas I think when it comes to AEW, and the reason why personally I'm a huge fan of it, and Omega being a figurehead of that, is the stories that they are telling you, be that the length of stories. Like I remember one time where I was getting a bit fed up at one point halfway through the year.
Yeah. I remember that.
Because I just wanted something to happen. But that, I think that came from a position. Like at the end of the day, if you're always handed over something really quickly and and promptly, and then there's a time when that doesn't happen, and like you're used to it, you're like that's just you. That's on a weekly wrestling basis wherever you watch, and then all of a sudden you don't get that for a very long period of time. It agitates you, and it agitated me. But so I think that was probably the big sort of light bulb moment for me, where it's just like actually. No, like I'm wrong here. I'm wrong. Like me expecting Omega to make some brash decision just doesn't make sense in the context of what's happened.
Yeah, that's another thing as well, which again, I always say wrestling storytelling basically outside of anything Omega's involved in, because that's what I've seen for the most part anyway. It can be very basic, and sometimes that's in a good way. I think New Japan does it in a really good way, where they'll tell quite basic stories, Omega apart, aside from that basically, but really effectively. And then you get the other side of the spectrum with a company we won't name, where it's just very, very simplistic and shouted down your throat. But one thing that I think stories really should do is frustrate you to some point, because that means that you care. You should feel a range of emotions, so you should feel angry at points. You should feel sad at points. You should feel happy at points. You should feel frustrated. I was watching Lilo and Stitch. This is a really weird example,
I love
but
Lilo
I
and
was watching
Stitch.
Lilo and Stitch last night, and there was one point where I was just like, "Oh fucking hell!" Just talk to each other. Obviously, Stitch kind of can talk, kind of can't. Basically, it's just like Stitch going on the journey of having to realize his self-worth, and you just get so frustrated at the fact that basically everything's happening, because realistically this solution is so simple, but the point is that the person in that moment can't see it, and it happens to you on a daily basis. You'll have like, or maybe not daily, that would be hell, but like you'll have like times in your life where you're really frustrated at a situation, maybe an argument, or maybe something, if you're a Jeremy Kyle kind of person, some kind of huge family dispute or something. But like these things happen, like you don't generally, you'll do things in the short term, but like, so maybe that'll be like storm off or whatever. But it doesn't, if you think about it in a story context, it won't actually mean all that much. And it's kind of a hard thing when you're doing like weekly TV and you're like, where should this actually be placed? I think Omega does it so well, and the fact that like it kind of helps that he basically can book himself, because obviously
Oh yeah, absolutely.
if you're working for certain other companies, you wouldn't always get that freedom. But ultimately, you judge people on what they have, and Omega has that power, so good for him. But yeah, like figuring out where to place something, something like Hangman betraying the Young Bucks, or something as simple as Omega snapping on Marco's stunt, like because of what that later informed, and like it just basically showed his frustration at all this petty stuff between Hangman and Young Bucks, which again is all very petty and could be solved really, really simply. He just showed his frustration because, again, like you said, at the start, he was very passive, and that can seem like, oh, he's not really doing that much. But it's actually really good because he was just there like, look, guys, stop fighting. This is stupid. And then the more they fight, it's just like, oh. And then the more he can genuinely become frustrated, and you can kind of understand it, even if maybe you're like, oh, you're still being a dick, but you can still understand it. And again, something as small as that thing with Marco Stunt, he did it on Alan Angels as well in a 6-man with the Young Bucks. Basically, I think what they were doing was Young Bucks were the match was they're basically fighting jobbers, and they were kind of struggling. So eventually Omega snaps, and then like seconds later they get the win. And that in Omega's head again is a light bulb moment where his character can be like, I just stopped putting up with their shit, did my own thing, and then we won. So that's what I'm going to do from now on, basically. And again, when Hangman let him down, he just storms out because he's like, well, I'll just go do my own thing. And it all makes like, it's so simple, but like I think like the fact that this actually has to be like considered great or whatever, because actually it's very, well, no, it is a really well told story regardless of the medium, but it is a very simple story, and it's kind of just done really well, and it kind of just exposes how terrible most wrestling is in terms of storytelling. But yeah, like it's just, again, it's those little details, but it's informed by so much of what comes before, whether that is just weeks of not much happening, but the frustration building within Omega, that will then lead to a moment, or the same for Hangman's character, the Young Bucks, or whatever. And that was part of what was so great about it. And again, I mean, wrestling's supposed to work you. You're supposed to get annoyed at some points. So I remember when you said that, I think you said it on a stream where you want something to happen. And I was just like, in my head, I was just thinking, well, that means this is actually as good as I think it is. And I was like, yes, even though I was also frustrated. When you said it, I was like, this actually means it's working. So yeah, I really like that. But
Yeah, but that's for me. It is quite genuinely working me. And
yeah,
that in itself in wrestling, I think, is a dying art.
yeah,
You know, we just don't get a whole lot of it. We see it with some guys like Evil over in New Japan. Again, I don't. You've made a clear point, and I do agree with you, Japan and thing. But at the end of the day, it's a clear effort to make you despise and hate someone. His rise
yeah.
to the top and the way he goes about it. But
It wasn't
from
initially the Evil thing. We weren't against it. Like it wasn't bad. It was everything that came after. They just I don't know. It was just really boring to watch, and it was like I don't really actually care about him anymore. I've seen him fight Naito about 80,000 times now, and I just don't care anymore. Like, and that's ultimately what you want to avoid. You need to find a way of keeping it hot. So whether it's like, you don't want to stagnate to the point where it just becomes boring. You want to stagnate to the point where you want fans to then be like, I want to see what's going to happen next. Come on, get to it, because that's what it is. Whereas if they're just going, I don't actually really care what happens next. Can we just move on to the next match? That's what you don't want, basically.
Yeah,
and I think ultimately, the start of Evil wasn't that bad, but where it went kind of went down the toilet.
For my taste, it was a bit rushed, but especially in the context of what we're talking about now, where people are taking their time, you get very little on a weekly basis. But at the end of the day, the things that you are getting, they have not a lot, but a fair amount of detail that you can invest yourself within, and hopefully within a couple of months' time, you can really see the benefits of that, of your time and effort in investing yourself in that story. So we've blabbered on a bit, and essentially, right, we haven't even talked about the way that Kenny has been on commentary, his tone, how that's changed, how dismissive he is of Hangman, is again very simple stuff, but his tone, like, you've just got to watch it and appreciate. Again, he's just doing his job, and there are other people on commentary that I've seen, and they're doing a fantastic job in commentary in general, but they're not really conveying much of a story. But Omega, that's what I love about AEW, though. You'll have some match, and it'll be Hangman versus someone. Maybe I think it was the tournament, leading to Hangman versus Omega, and it was a Hangman Page match against someone, maybe Cole Cabana, something like that. And you had that match, which is all well and good, but you had, which is part of the story with Hangman and his attempt in sort of some effort of redemption in his regards. But then you had a bit of storytelling and commentary in and of itself between Kenny Omega and Hangman, and that was fantastic as well. So
I think as well, like, it was like every time Hangman was in a match, it seemed like Kenny was on commentary. I think between All Out and Full Gear, including the Eliminator tournament, I think he had something like 4 matches, might have been 5, I can't remember. But Omega was on commentary for all of them, and it was just like every time you saw Hangman, it was just like, yeah, he's not really up to scratch as a singles performer, you know. And then he started talking about himself, and then it's just like, oh. And then like every time, like his opponent, they did the near falls and stuff in terms of Hangman losing, because you're never really in any of those matches in any doubt that Hangman was gonna lose. I think the Wardlow one was the only one that kind of worked me a little bit, but still not really. But you're never really in any doubt. But the fact is, just like the way Omega was kind of commentating over it, every time his opponent, Hangman's opponent, comes close to winning, Omega, you could kind of hear the glee in his voice almost. And it is like, in a way where it's like, you can tell, okay, imagine like wrestling is completely real and Omega is a real character or a real person. You can tell that person will be trying not to show his colors, but showing them. And it's a really masterful kind of, again, piece of acting from Kenny Omega, because it's not like he's not shoving it down your throat, but it's just there. And he does it so well. And again, like, I think one of the most effective things a wrestler can be is a good actor, because when it comes to moments like these, they can invest you so much more. Yeah. And I think that is one of Omega's real strengths as well. Hangman Adam Page is amazing at it as well. I think Hangman's probably the best actor I've seen in wrestling, including The Rock. The Rock's not actually a very good actor, even though he's really well paid. He's just really charismatic. That's it.
That's fair.
So just fuck off, because I know people always say that. I've been scared to tweet, oh, Hangman's probably the best actor in wrestling, because I know people are looking about, well, The Miz was really good in this movie. Oh, John Cena. Oh, The Rock. Just because they've been in movies, as if that's like proves anything. Loads of terrible actors in Hollywood doesn't prove anything. Anyway.
No. Like that's a very fair point, though, because there has been plenty of times in regards, especially Hangman as well, which I feel as if there will come a future video one day of us talking about Hangman, because of course he's done some wonderful stuff. Without, yes, he's had a tag title, but like we also saw him as a future singles star, and he's excelled in his role as well, of failure essentially, being at the top and then falling to the bottom. I know he's with Dark Order.
If Omega didn't have that tag match, although then Adam Page wouldn't have it either. Let's say Omega didn't have the Pac match, the Lucha, no. Take away Omega singles stuff, basically, because all the tag stuff includes Hangman and Page. You're probably then looking at Hangman as the rest of the year. I think just what separates them right now is that, because when you look at like obviously all the tag matches, Page is the one that was probably the better performer, and part of that was Omega letting him and kind of guiding and stuff, because ultimately
That's part of the story, right? That's part of the story. Yeah, go on.
And outside of like the kayfabe world, that's essentially what Omega is. He's essentially a mentor to Hangman, who's about almost 10 years younger than him. I think it's actually like 7 years, but whatever. But he's essentially helping build the next huge star, and he's going to put him over, and it's going to be amazing. And maybe this time next year we'll be talking about Hangman in this same realm as we're talking about Omega, because there's things like character work and storytelling, and no doubt that Hangman's getting all this taught to him by Omega, because you've got someone this good right next to you, you'd be silly not to kind of take it all in. But Hangman is like just as good an actor, I'd say better. He's going to pick up all these details, things which are things you can learn to do. And there are so many little details, like the smile recently against with the Dark Order segment on Dynamite. Just such a small little detail, but that kind of tells you so much. He's getting all these little things from Omega. So basically, as soon as he starts having better matches than him, which might never happen because Omega is probably the best ever, or at least he's up there for sure. But as soon as he starts really hitting that top level of his career, you're just going to see like Hangman explode, I think, into like just this incredible start. And again, a lot of that will be to the credit of Kenny Omega. Everyone needs someone to work with. Everyone needs a teacher. Everyone needs guidance and stuff. So, again, just another thing Omega's done amazing this year, which is kind of out of the realms of what we kind of judge, but it's still equally commendable, I think.
And to cap off this video with a nice little bow tie as well, we can obviously acknowledge then the achievements that Omega has made during his time within AEW, and I'd say other promotions. For the end of the day, it's just been AEW for the 99% of it all. So at the beginning of the year, it was the boat episode, Chris Jericho's boat. I small tangent. I love those episodes. I love it when we just get a little different setting. It really helps make those very like I still remember it as if it was yesterday, because it just really, and hasn't this year flown by, man? It generally has.
It has and it hasn't.
Yeah, exactly. But again, winning those titles, the rise to that occasion was absolutely fantastic, and of course, having that, he's just won the world title. And he did it in despicable fashion, as Shivani would often convey. And Shivani's just not happy about it at all, is he? He's talking about people doing great work. Shivani, one of the best commentators.
I'm happy. Everyone's like, everyone on Twitter just seems to be. Every time he says something, just like, I love him. Because I'm so happy.
Yeah,
no one deserves that more.
No, he's one of the most likable figures I've, in my personal experience of watching wrestling, like commentary wise, absolutely phenomenal. He as Omega has excelled at doing completely different things this year than he's used to.
Yeah.
And we talk of the little things, whether that's of course being in tag matches, and of course at the end of the day, as you've rightly acknowledged, Hangman Page did have a lot to do within those tag matches as well. That served the story, again, talking about people doing their jobs, essentially, working it out. So, and it's kind of weird saying that Kenny Omega is great because he's taken a little bit of a back seat and letting other people shine around him, and therefore he's fantastic and he's better and he's had the better year. Obviously it's a combination of a lot of many other things. But at the end of the day, like, if that's your role, you need to do that role and do it exceptionally. And that's what he did, because hell, everyone's won over with Hangman Page. Everyone wants to see Hangman Page eventually get to the top. And who do you have to thank for that? The story that he has with Omega and his own character work in his own right in Hangman.
It's a collaborative effort, isn't it? You're never going to have
Absolutely.
a great match without a great opponent. Omega and Okada had the best match ever because they're probably the two best, or they're two of the best wrestlers ever, and it was the perfect kind of combination. It wasn't just the fact that they just so happened to rock up, and it wasn't just one of the best matches ever, four of the best matches ever. It kind of shows that it wasn't just we just had a little scrap and then turned out it was really good. There was a lot that kind of went into it, but like ultimately, they both needed each other to be able to achieve that. If it had been Okada versus Dookie, for example, it just wouldn't have been that good. Even if you put Dookie in that position, it just wouldn't have been that good. No offense to Dookie. But yeah, and again, tag matches are even more that because you've got two opponents and you've got a partner. But ultimately, I think the individuals involved all deserve credit within those. And again, like you said, Nick Jackson had his own bit of dynamic in the match. Matt Jackson had his own dynamic. Hangman had his dynamic, and Page played his role as well. So you've got all of that. So
yeah, absolutely. Also, if we talk achievements, two singles wrestlers, I believe, were they second in the PWI tag team?
Something like that.
They were definitely top five. Definitely top five in that bracket. Phenomenal. Like as far as I'm aware, I don't think anyone could. But obviously, there's many people could. But that in itself is a feat for not tag team wrestlers. At the end of the day, not people that know each other like the back of their hand and stuff like that. Go on.
I think also PWI is kayfabe and all that, so blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Take the kayfabe out of it, I think they're the best tag team of the year for sure, because the matches they had, the reign they had is the best tag reign I've ever seen. In terms of it wasn't just these great matches against Lucha Brothers or the Young Bucks or FTR. They held really good matches along the way with Best Friends, Private Party, Dark Order, stuff like that. And there were TV matches. They're never going to be match of the year and stuff. But ultimately, if you're having a title reign, it's like John Moxley's. He had amazing match against Kenny Omega. He had an amazing match against MJF and stuff. Amazing match against Brody Lee on the two pay-per-views. But his match with Eddie Kingston as a standalone match, nothing out of this world. But the story that went into it was amazing. So what made Moxley's kind of title reign so great is the amount of variety you had, different match styles and all sorts of different things, different types of feuds. He had competitive things. He had personal things. He had an amazing match with Darby Allin, which is just a great TV main event. It's the exact same with the Young Bucks. They had not the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega and Hangman. They had everything to their reign. And again, similar to I don't know if I've seen anyone have a better babyface reign than Moxley in Western wrestling, at least for a long time, for sure. It's the same with Hangman and Kenny. As a reign, when you take it outside of the kayfabe, I think they're tag team of the year for that reason. They only wrestled for about 9 months of it as a tag team. But, FTR only wrestled for about 9 months as well, when you take out the amount that they had to take as a break. But yeah, I'd say it was them personally. Again, PWI is a kayfabe thing, so I'm not
it is a
having
kayfabe.
Shot at that. I understand why FTR won it.
No, it's just, again, it's one of those sort of lines that's easy just to make on my part. It's just it's just acknowledged by a lot of people that they were one of the best, and here's an example as to why. Or probably at a bar or something like that as to where they put themselves at. But of course, the way in which he's adapted, and not only just to tag matches, but an entire different era during this pandemic era. He's done. Let's not forget, he's done all of this during a really challenging time in the wrestling landscape as a whole.
As has everyone who's had this year, all of John
absolutely.
Moxley's achievements like that as well.
Absolutely.
I think the thing that really stood out for the pandemic with Omega was the first great match I remember seeing in the pandemic was Omega versus Guevara for that AAA title on Dynamite. That was the first time, because up until then I was worried, with no fans, is this even going to be good? Is it going to be watchable? And by no means was that match of the year or anything, but it was a really, really, really good match, where I was convinced, okay, yes, this is Omega and he's amazing anyway, but okay, this can be done and it can be done well. I can still enjoy it. So from that point on, I wasn't worried anymore.
Yeah.
And then you obviously had the match with Trent, which was the first time when they went into the QT Marshall's gym. That was the first time I was like, okay, you can still have good matches even though like it's in a gym, even though it wasn't that different. But again, there was another slight worry, and it was erased again by Omega. And then you had the things like the tag with Matt Hardy versus Jericho and Guevara, which kind of spawned into then the Stadium Stampede, which kind of defined a new match style. We'd seen cinematic matches before, of course, with mainly Matt Hardy, and obviously it helps having Matt Hardy, someone who's excelled in that realm, by your side. But it's like they made a whole new meme. It was really entertaining, and you just it was the first time, yeah, and it was the first time I forgot that there was no crowd because it was just great. And it's like I still think like as good as that Best Friends versus Proud and Powerful match was, they did have a little bit of a crowd because they had like everyone like surrounded around them, so it was a bit of an atmosphere, and it was all in one area. In terms of a proper cinematic match, I still think obviously Stadium Stampede's the best, I think. But in terms of besides that, I think it's that tag with Jericho, Guevara, and Matt Hardy, and it helps that you've got Matt Hardy and Jericho, probably two of the most creative guys in wrestling, as is Kenny Omega. It helps that you've got three of them involved, and then someone like Sammy Guevara who can just take bumps for days and is really good at that. And it's not a surprise also that Guevara excelled in two of those matches either. I think he deserves some credit, as of course. But again, Omega was involved in all of these matches, which kind of defined this new era right at the start. Obviously, we did have a really good one with Bray Wyatt and John Cena as well at WrestleMania. But yeah, again, he just kind of made it was like, okay, this is a new normal for wrestling, and Omega was kind of a key part in that. So I think that's something that you really have to put into context.
And I think something I'd like to end with, as we're reaching the hour mark with this video, is we all have our own ideas of what we want from wrestling, what we want to see from our wrestling. And so much so, we all get a bit self-absorbed and we only care about what we want. But at the end of the day, these are people like going out, putting, effectively their lives, out and out on a weekly basis, out to entertain us and ultimately do a phenomenal job at it. Kenny Omega's goals, at least from what we see, is that he wants to challenge wrestling itself and its own tropes, and its own ideology in a way, and challenge the traditions of it, whether that be Golden Lovers stuff, whether that be his rise and a different career approach. Rather than going to WWE, he went over to DDT, established, he basically rose within a completely different country, different culture, all these variety of things. And now he's doing something completely different. It was, as far as reports were saying, he was able to go to WWE, or at least they were going to be offering to have him over there. That was an option. But he's taken on a new challenge, a challenge that's more suitable for him and his own goals in challenge and wrestling. And because, of course, now he's got a bigger position than he ever would in WWE. I think he's certainly challenged me and my thoughts on wrestling and the way that I think about wrestling, and for the better, definitely. And I think, although it's very easy to say, yes, he's had a phenomenal tag match and all these things, that's not the reason why I think he's had the best year. That's just that in itself is like a bonus, That's the cherry on the top. But I think if we're going to talk about the real cake in this, in this instance, it's been the character, it's been the story, it's been the little details, and ultimately, I think he's excelled in challenging a variety of things. And in terms of that, right, heel turn, right, he could have easily just snapped, as all heel turns do. He could have,
as people wanted as well. People were angry when he didn't.
And he even challenged the
Yeah.
idea of a heel turn in a way,
Yeah.
because he didn't feel the need to snap or anything like that and make it all that obvious. He went about it in a completely different fashion, and it still worked, and it still fitted the story. He didn't attack anyone, he didn't do anything like, or like anyone of any meaning to him, be that
Yeah.
Paige, the Bucks, or anything like that. He just took his title and left, and
Yeah.
that in itself, like I was questioning if it was a heel turn. This is how like conditioned I am as a watcher, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I wasn't too sure. Like,
Yeah.
but then it was verified later on a BTE,
Yeah.
that that's what's been done. That's what's happening. And then, lo and behold, the following Dynamite, he comes out of the heel tunnel.
Yeah. I think part of people's confusion with that as well is he actually turned heel way before that.
Yeah.
It was basically when he walked out on Hangman, I was like, he's a heel for sure.
Yeah.
Or at least he's going to turn heel for sure. That was
Yeah.
the moment, because there was still the worry again. There were still people going, "Oh, Hangman's going to be the one to turn heel." I was like, "No, he's not. No, he's not. He's just not." Especially by that point, where I was just like, "If they do this, I'll give up on this company immediately. I'll just give up on wrestling." But yeah, I think you said something like Kenny Omega's like challenged what kind of you kind of expected from wrestling and stuff, and I think for me it was like he challenged it as well, but it was like before Kenny Omega this year from Kenny Omega, my favorite was always Daniel Bryan. I still think partially for sentimental reasons, Daniel Bryan it'll be at least on par with Omega, but and Hangman as well. But for me, it was like it gave me faith that like wrestling actually can be good, because I was just like, for a long time, I was getting to the point with WWE where I was just like, oh, this just sucks. And New Japan is very different from what I necessarily want. I do like New Japan, but it is different. I watch it for basically different reasons than I watch AEW, effectively, and because it's such a different style in terms, like American TV is just so different from Japanese wrestling. But like what it was for Omega was it just confirmed to me that wrestling actually can be this. It can be what I've kind of wanted. Because with Daniel Bryan, it was always he was kind of excelling with what he was given, and he was making like something which was terrible, basically the booking of him, or at least the booking plans of him, and then he broke through them and forced them to do better, basically. And he basically made a terrible company. It's probably the biggest creative achievement in wrestling, because he basically forced them to do something good with him, and it was amazing. But I think what Omega did was he showed that actually there are some intelligent, creative people in wrestling, and who have power at least, because there's loads who don't have any power. There's loads who want to be able to do stuff in WWE. They're just not able to.
Yeah.
But it was just the first time that something really broke through. It's like what you're trying to do is actually coming off, and it's actually working, and it's actually really good. Like outside of wrestling, this is good. Otherwise, and it was the first time I was like, I like. There's always been a part in my head where it's like wrestling's always been like, yeah. If I told someone that I watched it, I'd be like, yeah, it is kind of shit, but I just always watched it or whatever, something like that. I haven't always watched it, but watched it for a long, long time. And it was always like that kind of thing. Whereas now I can be like, yeah, I don't watch that WWE crap. Gave up on that. There's this really good company called AEW, this guy called Kenny Omega, and I can go off about that and actually like talk about that. I've had conversations with people who are like friends from the theatre world, which I'm kind of given up on, but still have a lot of friends within, and explaining it to them, and they're like, that actually sounds good. Like I just thought it would just be men oiling themselves up and slapping each other, which is basically what New Japan is, but in a good way, and basically what WWE is in a bad way. But kind of when I've explained like AEW and particularly Kenny Omega to people who aren't fans, it's the only thing that's ever like been like, that's actually interesting. And they've actually asked more questions, So that's kind of what it kind of meant to me more than like being challenged. It was more a confirmation that what I kind of hoped would ever happen. I didn't think it ever would, because I just thought, well, you know, it's just Vince and all his money, and that's all wrestling will ever be, on a big scale, at least, obviously, in America.
Yeah.
But Kenny Omega's completely come and shattered that, and yeah, I can't thank him enough.
Yeah, I can't thank him enough either. Like, absolutely phenomenal stuff this year. And I tell you what, right? I cannot wait for a decade's time, or maybe 2 decades' time, where the people who are influenced by the likes of Omega rise up and
Yeah,
they take on inspiration from him and the
yeah,
idea of details and the way that he challenges. Maybe there'll be different challenges to come in the next couple, whatever many years it is, and then those people challenge it, and then maybe you've got the likes of Kenny Omega. Maybe he manages one of them. Maybe he plays the Don Callis role. Like all these variety of things, and
yeah,
years and years and years to come. I think he's just a very positive force within the wrestling landscape as a whole, and ultimately, I just feel really lucky, man.
yeah. For sure.
I think it's really sad when people bash AEW. I understand we all have our different tastes, but and AEW does have its faults. We've talked about them throughout the channel. Feel free to check out the women's
Yeah,
division video and all these variety things. We acknowledge that it's far from perfect, but I tell you
yeah,
what, when it gets it right, and Kenny Omega is often in up there when it gets it right,
yeah,
it's bloody good. It's the best
yeah,
wrestling has. And I'll say that, like, it's the best, and I think Kenny Omega is just one of the best. Yeah. So that's it.
yeah. I think like you said, in years to come, we're going to see Omega's impact on the industry, and we definitely will. Oh, impact! But it's so good because you don't even have to wait 20 years. Hangman's part of that. The Young Bucks are part of that, and also the Young Bucks, they're really good in their own right. It's not like this is Omega doing it on his own. I think it's just this is a video about him, so we're talking about him. But there are people like Hangman and the Young Bucks and others as well within the company who are like taking on these points and being like, oh, I actually have a bit of creative freedom. I can actually do something bigger than just, oh, hit him, heel, face.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't even know how to describe the WWE story because I honestly just don't. They don't really do them, to be honest.
Go on.
I know if anyone's actually still watching this, that's going to piss people off. Well, I've got a degree in it, so go suck your mum.
Don't suck your mum. We don't want you to go to jail. Right.
But yeah, we've rambled on a long time.
We've rambled on a long time. Talking about the Young Bucks, I reckon that would be a really interesting video exploring their own storytelling in their own right, because they used to get quite a lot of hate back on.
Oh, that's so ridiculous as well.
And I think this year they've shown themselves to be absolutely fantastic in a variety of other things other than Spotfest. Don't get me wrong, Spotfest galore. They're still at the top
We
of
love
that.
one.
It's not AEW without Spotfest, but they've excelled in other roles as well. So maybe that's a video to come in the future. Who knows? But if you've enjoyed this, if you stuck around for an hour this year, first of all, thank you ever so much for that. It really means the world. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know if we're wrong. Let us know if we're right.
We're not wrong.
Let us
We're not.
know if there are other people doing exceptional things and you think they deserve a shine too. And with that, we thank you for watching this video. Consider subscribing, all that good stuff. All the Twitter stuff is down below. Gareth is does amazing stuff, articles and stuff like that, so you can keep up to date with that as well. Better than everyone.
I'm better than you, and you know it.
So thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Bye-bye.